So when we talk about human rights violation in conflict situations, people learn, social cognition and justification of violence, which means that when we grow up in a society where human rights abuse or human rights violation have been a common practice, so we learn that it is something that we could do and something that people who do it get survived, and then that makes people repeatedly doing the violation more and more, because they don't have any effect or they don't have any responsibility for the violation of the human rights at all. So it becoming the justification of the violence that they are doing. I had experience working at the situation at three border provinces of Thailand in the south, and I was engaged in several events in a couple of decades of political conflict in Thailand. Okay, so here when we are going to talk today, like a human rights violation could cause conflict. Okay, I could elaborate later on, but the thing is, like human rights violation makes a lot of conditions of living in jeopardize. So then that's why it could cause the conflict. That's what we are going to discuss. Another thing is, we talk about during the time of conflict, there are always the violation of human rights, especially violence conflict in the deep south of Thailand. Because for the authorities, they said that those who organize violence in the deep south, they are the separatists, they are insurgents. But for the viewpoint of those people who organize violence against the Thai authority, they claim themselves to be liberators. Okay, liberators, from the from the Thai colonization onto their land. So then there are the 2 points of view. But anyway, the thing is, when during the time of violence conflict, so then people violate human rights all the times. The third point is that this kind of human rights violation can be continued and repeatedly, during the time of violence conflict. So these 3 points will be elaborated and discussed. We can see that human rights violation is violence. And when we talk about the conflict transformation, we tend to reduce violence of all kinds. There are 3 kinds of violence: direct violence, structural violence, and cultural violence. When we have the human rights violation, it could be all kinds of violence. Why? Because when you violate the right to live, the right to live is something that really directly physically harm to you. For example, like the junta government is physically forcing you to injure or to imprison, to put you in prison. This is physically to you. So then this is what we call direct violence. So then this is the kind of violation of human rights that really inflict a kind of violence into you, and it is a direct violence. And then when the junta government issue the laws that are not very following the rule of law, but just become your law, that's what we call rule by law. So then they issue so many laws that they want to rule you. It is becoming the structure of the society, and it is a kind of structural violence that might not really affect yourself physically, but it creates some impact on your living. Like there are some special decrees or a state of emergency that you cannot go out, you cannot have assembly, you cannot go for the demonstration. There are certain rights that are not allowed to do. Your rights are violated by certain set of laws. This is also a kind of violence, which is a structural violence. And then when this come into the cognitive process to justify that to abuse of human rights is some kinds of acceptable, and then it is conveyed through generations or maybe to the public that, okay, this is the right thing to do. When the junta government imposed that those who are not abide by the law of these the authoritarian governments can be punished or should be punished, and people just repeatedly doing that. And this kind of learning process to justify the law is becoming what we call the cultural violence, to create the hatred among groups of people, to create the hostility, to create fears. This is the way that they inflict the cultural violence into the society, and people learn to do that. So when people choose to not to fight back, choose not to protect their rights because it is better not to have any problem against the authorities, it is better not to fight with the military, and people learn to do that and tell, conventionally teach to their children, oh, don't go to the demonstration, don't do this, don't do that. And it's becoming the norm of the society. It is what we call the cultural violence. So then when we have the human rights violation, it is the violence for sure. It could be the violence of all kinds that we are trying to fight with. The violation of human rights could be the cause of conflict because the conditions of living are compromised. When, as I just mentioned earlier, that when we have the human rights violations, if it's physically, they put you in prison, or they don't provide sufficient economic accessibility or economic resources, they don't provide like good conditions for living. For example, if they are factory next to your village, and they produce a lot of pollution, air pollution, you cannot even breathe nicely, each day that you wake up from your bed. So then this is a human rights violation, and it caused a certain negative impact on the conditions of living. So then this, when it repeatedly or when it occurred, so that it could be the cause of the conflict. Or maybe when they issue some laws that prohibit you from, exercising sufficient freedoms that you need to have. So then you feel oppressed, and then it is the cause of the conflict. Or when, when those violators, trying to create the atmosphere of fear, hatred, hostility, so then people cannot live in a society where, surrounding by fear, you don't know when you're going to be arrested, you don't know when you need to be evacuated from your living places, you don't know whether how much taxation will one day raise, or this kind of thing. They are affected the conditions of living, and then they could be the cause of the conflict. The violation of human rights could be the cause of the protracted social conflict from all kinds of injustice. There are conditions of the protracted social conflict. It means that when there are certain groups of people are, for example, in a diverse society, I mean, when everyone is equally participated, everyone is recognized as a citizen, so that's fine. But when there are certain group of people get when the power or political power in the society is asymmetrical, which means that somebody get very, very much of the power and somebody doesn't have that much of the power at all. And for those who have a lot of power, oppress those who have less power. So very much of asymmetrical power in the society. So then this is one of the conditions of the protracted social conflict. So a lot of things, and the other condition is the condition of living for certain groups of people in the society is not equally distributed, which means that in a particular society, somebody get access into the resources, somebody don't, you know, especially certain groups of people. Some identities have been ignored, you know, and the recognition of some groups, I mean, those who are oppressed have not been recognized. So then this is this is the kinds of justice that occurred during the time of protracted social conflict. So then human rights violation is the same thing, right? Because when you are in the same society and you are not treated in the same way, you are not equally accessed into the resources, your identity are not recognized. So those are your rights that being violated. So then it is also could be the cause of the protracted social conflict. Another thing is when our human rights are violated, it created wounds like when you cut yourself, okay? And this kind of wound could be physically, of course, like if you have to face the violent situation, conflict situation. But this wound could be mentally wounds as well, okay? And this kind of, when I say that when it is repeatedly violated, these wounds persisted for a long time and sometimes throughout generations, you know, because this kind of wound can be what we call primary wounds that you experience it by yourself and secondary wound that you experience later on. Anyway, okay, these are what we call human rights violation could be considered as a violence. And then if you want to work with the conflict transformation, so then we have to make the reduction of all this kind of violence, which means that we have to convey the reduction of human rights violation and to protect people's rights. Okay, let me see how things are related between human rights and conflict transformation. Okay, I use this diagram very often because I invented by myself, and I'm really proud of it. It comes from so many books altogether, but one of the phrases that is very much to our interest is what's said by John Paul Lederer. He said that the past that lies before us. The thing is, when we enter conflict situation and the violence conflict is going on, we hope that we will get rid of the conflict and then, you know, live our life normally or peacefully, okay? So if this is the track of the conflict, and normally when we are whatever in the part of this conflict, we always think about this point. But the thing is, when we call that the past that lies before is that it's not just like when we go to the conflict and we just get through disregarding what had happened in the past. Because every time when we want to get rid of a conflict or we get out of conflict, there are always something that had happened in the past coming in front of us to block us from getting through the conflict situation. So that's why they call the past that lies before us. So then we cannot go through, we cannot move on as long as we don't consider what happened in the past. So then look, today we don't look into the future, we look back into the past, okay? The thing is like, as I said, that human rights violation created wounds, okay? The wounds that can call primary wounds and the secondary wounds, okay? Human rights violation can cause both of these kind of wounds, you know, and then all kinds of abuses, or maybe unrecognized, being excluded from the society. This kind of thing created a wound. The situation in the Deep South, like in the Deep South of Thailand, we have majority group who are the Malay ethnic, and they are Muslim, and they want these kind of their identities to come up, to be recognized, not recognized that just only they are Malay Muslim, but recognized by the way of living. Okay, being unrecognized also seems like being excluded from the society, and then it creates the wound. And this wound has been, you know, occurred or has been inflicted years or decades or maybe centuries ago, okay, or more than a century ago, okay, and it's still up until today because the storytelling, because of some local historical records, or you know, like it transfer conventionally from generations to generations, so that it's become the wound, okay, and then because of this human rights violation could be the cause from the past. So then, as I mentioned earlier, that even in the current situation, when many of abuses or human rights violation in the past have already passed certain period of time until the current situation, why people still feel that they are still abused by the authorities? Because there are some kind of repeatedly, you know, human rights violation up until now, and it repeats the same thing all over throughout so many generations. So that's why people still realize that this asymmetrical power make them be oppressed, and it's the cost of being abused over and over again. So then that's why when we are facing with the conflict situation and we still having human rights violation occurred, there is no way that we will be able to transform the conflict, because it's still there. You still feel it, you still experience it every day. You know, it's a kind of continuing abuse all the time. You know, you can have social healing, making recognition, you have some punishment, amnesty, you know, you have the created platform, you know, you having some kind of mutual understanding, reviewing some mutual facts, you know, and passing through transitional justice process. And maybe if we can have the truth enough, facts fighting and everything, it might be able to lead to a certain level of forgiveness, okay? And then you can see the future, okay? But we don't have future today, okay? Anyway, when we talk about the wound, when I talk about the wound, I would like to elaborate a little bit more for you. The thing is, there are two kinds of wound. We have primary wound and the secondary wound. Primary wound is that when we directly affect from the human rights violation. For example, like you get arrested, you know, by the political means, okay? You have to evacuate it from your work, from your living place because of the polluted air pollution, polluted water. You have to be displaced from your, you know, from the areas of work because somebody violated your rights. These people get the first-hand experience of being violated. So it is wound inside their like their perceptions, their experience, their mentally, their uh, acknowledgement of being abused. But the thing is, it is as important as the secondary wound. The secondary wound is something of the sympathical feeling that other people have in the name of the first-hand experience people. Let me explain to you, like when you watch football, there might be only 22 players in the field. They try to compete with each other. And these 22 people, from two teams, could be considered as the primary wound, those who are really experienced. But for people who are on the stage, like 10,000, 20,000 people who are on the stage, they watch football. They didn't play by themselves, but they watch football. But they support one of those two teams. And of course, when people get hurt in the field, people get disappointed in the field, they feel exactly almost the same or even more than the players, because they have sympathetic affiliations to the players. Or even you watch the TV at home, you feel sympathetic feelings attached to that. So then when the people who have the first-hand experience get the pain, you feel the same pain. So then this kind of a secondary wound can expand more into public or the groups of people, and then it expand the scope of the violence conflict, because there are more and more sympathizers, especially when the human rights violations has been repeatedly practiced over again and again and again. So then there are more and more sympathizers for that. Okay, this is how the wounds are really functioning. But the most importantly, when the primary wounds from the political injustice and could lead to the secondary wounds as well, when the violation of human rights repeatedly and the wounds persisted, which means that, or why are those things are persisted? Because when you have the violation of the victims of the human rights, you can see, like when people get wounded, as I already explained in the diagram just right now. This is also, when they're repeatedly, so then there are more and more people being the victims, okay? And then those who are violated get some harms. It's just like physically harms, or maybe being in prison, maybe unable to live their well conditions of life. And at certain point, we are being, the victims are being ignored. Okay, the victim is ignorance of the source and circumstances of the political injustice. So in Thailand, in 2010, or even before, many people who claim themselves to be the victims of violence, of political violence, have never been considered victims. They are ignored, and they say that they are the problem of the society instead of fighters for the democracy. So then this is how the wound is still going on and on and on, because when we talk about the human rights violation, it's not just only because somebody really directly violates, or even sometimes when you ignore, when you don't do anything, it is even you more than what you do something. Okay, so this is the ignorance, also the source, and also the cause of making the wound from the political injustice. Lack of acknowledgement of the suffering of the victims. Okay, if the public doesn't really know, doesn't concern, people died, people get killed, people get abused. There were a strategic lawsuit against public participations. Many people have been imprisoned, but nobody cares. this is also making the wound worse. You know, you feel more pain, okay? And of course, the sympathizers feel that pain as well. And this is also very important, you know, like standing victory of the wrongdoer in the political injustice. You can see the situation in Thailand right now, or even in the deep south of Thailand, or even political issues. Those people who have been claimed or have been marked as the perpetrators, you know, either the issues of the deep south that they have, you know, killed somebody, they have made a lot of human rights violations, or even political situations in Thailand, the junta government, those who staged the coup d'etat, those who abuse of the human rights, those who put our friends in the prison, they are still living very well. The coup leaders are still living very well. Why we are in a very bad situation, you know, when we are struggling to live. But those people who abuse us, they live so well. So then this is something that also making the wound persistent. And then, of course, at certain point, when we cannot find anything else, we might fight back violently as well, because we don't have any other alternative. So then these are the conditions that the primary wounds from the political injustice repeatedly wounded people, harmful and hurt people. So then all of this kind of thing, you can see that people who pass through all of these situations, they will learn that, okay, why do we have to fight back? Because then we could even get more pain, you know, and more that we pass through the social protracted social conflict goes on and on and on, you know, and then people in the society getting used to with this kind of impunity, that the wrongdoers feel free, stay fine and everything. So then this kind of thing make people perceive it and learn it and get into, you know, like a kind of norms or certain social practice that will either, okay, ignore, you know, to protect human rights, or ignore to protect their rights any longer. Or if we could, you know, expose this importance to the public, they might at least certain way recognize and fight back and protect their human rights and try to, you know, stop this kind of learning process and putting another mode of learning of human rights respectful in during the time of conflict, or even in the process of the conflict transformation. Social education or informal ways of educating people in the conflict areas. The thing is, like, if you can see that these people, okay, let's see the conflict situation in the deep south of Thailand began in, this round, okay, began 18 years ago in 2004, okay, 2004. Imagine that you were born in 2004, okay. How old are you now? It is 18 years, you are 18 years old. So it means that the whole of your life have been living in a place where you can expect any extreme violent situation anytime. You can face the bomb, you hear about the news that the bomb in that village, the shooting in that place, you know, whatever things that happen, you know, it means that you spend your whole lifetime in the conflict zone and experience extreme violence always, all the times. But imagine when in 2004, it's not just only people who were born in 2004. There were people, kids who were born, let's say maybe 15 years earlier. So 15 years prior 2004. So then you plus another 18 years. So then right now they are 30 something years old, 33 years old. They already have kids by themselves. So it means that there are generations of people experience the violence all the times. And if you see this kind of thing is very high dynamic, because when people learn throughout generations, right now, how many percentage of the population in Deep South have had first-hand experience of the violence conflict? I think there are more than 40% already, because from 18 years, so it means that 18 generations, but plus, when you are 15, you are already 30 something. When you're 14, you are 33. When you're 13, you're already 32. So then you can see that there are a kind of very high, big parameter of people who experience that. So that is the reason why we said we think that this kind of experience will create certain attitudes. This kind of attitudes is from everyday learning. You don't have to teach them. They learn by themselves every day. Maybe they learn to justify the fighting back with the violence. Maybe they learn to participate or becoming partial into either joining the government or joining the separatists or the another party. So there are so many choices that people can choose along this long period of time. So that's why all of this, when we work in the field, so we can see that there are so many generations that at least they don't experience a first-hand experience that by the violence, but they absorb those pain through the secondary experience. So that's why we organized like something that maybe to let them see things by themselves, to let them see and put them into the capability to understand that this kind of thing can be changed, and then it can be changed in their generations. So that's why we try to exchange people from the conflicted areas, and try to apart from making the input of human rights issues, conflicts issue, violence issues, to equip them with certain equipments, or instruments to live, actually, not just only to fight back, but just to live their lives, and then to exchange the experience, which is very important, because when you are in the conflicted areas, you're obsessed. Yeah, you're obsessed with the situation surrounding you. You don't less and less that you can see things in the world. So then all of the camps that we organize try to open the channels of perception, that maybe if they start to be able to see things clearer or in other perspectives or wider perspectives, they might generate their ideas or their attitudes easier. So then in most of the camps that we used, apart from giving the contents of the notions of human rights, the notion of peace, the notion of violence and conflict, so we have them had first-hand experience, in traveling into so many areas in the country. We don't have much money to let them go abroad, but many other areas, spend their lives, trying to experience something different and seeing different ways of life, and at the same time, bringing people from the other areas to live with them, to spend some time with them in their communities, in their areas, in order that they can, because the wound can come from being ignored as well, right? So then they can show their identities, they can be proud of how they live their lives. When people proud people proud for their identities when they can teach people, when they can tell people of the goodness of their daily life or their way of life. So then this is, when people from other areas come to the area, learn about them, learning about their identities, learning about, their, proud histories, learning about their proud identities. So then this is the way that we try to create some kind of mutual understanding of basic knowledge of human rights, of course, in everyday life. So then this is how we organize the peace camp. And surprisingly, after, of course, like 10 years of, or more than 10 years of, like almost 15 years of organizing these camps, for right now, in so many conflict situations, many of these former participants, when they were kids, they are sometimes becoming the leaders of the movement. Some of them becoming the lawyers to bail their friends out. Some of them have been assisting in so many means that they can help into making social change in the society right now. So I'm very happy. Even the impact comes. I hope that this kind of thing is still a good lesson to learn, and how it would be, useful in the future. The thing is, like, it depends on us, on how we interact with those authorities that come from the junta government. Because the thing is, like, of course, because they follow me almost every day actually, by the way. So I try to interact with them, try to talk to them, and then just like in a couple of years, they become to know me very well, and I become to know them very well. So then, at least in the interpersonal relationship, they are also not considered like the evil to me, because they are just a kind of person, but standing on the different political ideologies, and of course, like, that kind of thing that we can do by everyday life. And then later on, in the very later years, they sometimes they don't follow me. They just like, how you call that, give me a call, or sometimes they even warn me that, oh, okay, they bring us some news, some secrets, some information that it might be useful to us, So then that's how interact with some kind of the personal levels, in the interaction with this threat. Okay, when we talk about transitional justice, we have to say that we are transit from where to where. The thing is, like, people say that, oh, we have to begin the transitional justice, right? I said, come on, we are not transit from anywhere to anywhere, because we are still inside the conflict. We are still being abused, So then, what is change? What is to be transit? What is to be going across? We have to be sure. Transitional justice doesn't happen right when the human rights abuse still go on and on and on and on like this every day. We don't talk about this. And then many people just misunderstood that, okay, we talk about the transitional justice, and, but we need to really have to have the other lie, that apart from this lie, nobody is going to inflict any more human rights violations. Nobody is going to organize any crime or whatever any longer. So then we can talk about transitional justice. So then this is a kind of very important, you have the transitional justice considered the human rights principle, legitimate principle, and a democratic principle. And these are the three very important principles. We need to have the fact-finding, that is acceptable for all the conflicted parties. And then we can talk about whether we go for the punishment, and then otherwise we can talk about the amnesty. You know, it's not just like, hey, let's start the transgender justice just because we got to make the amnesty for those who convicted to violence, you know, in the past. No, we are not going to start by that. We start by understanding what is going to be changed, what is going to be transit, what is going to be transcend. We follow the philosophy of the human rights. We follow the philosophy of legitimacy of the law and legitimacy. We follow the principle of the democracy. We have to find the fact, you know, because the fact heal the wounds. You know, of course, it might be very painful to know the fact, but we need to have the fact, and the fact that could be acceptable. And then we can talk about the punishment, and at least we can talk about the amnesty. Otherwise, if we start from the amnesty, so then we create the culture of impunity. Okay, so this is like what we have, what happened with transgender justice. The thing is like when we talk about this kind of thing, then you know there are many other components, like maybe you have to make the you know something about the history, something about like the authoritarian society, you know, that's what happened, you know, how it goes on, and how the conventional of the authoritarian society goes on with throughout generation. And all these kind of things could be additional components, but at least what I said, those principles are to be considered for the transitional justice. Is not just happening easily. I think that's the address for the first question. But the thing is, for the second question, I feel really I don't have the very direct answer to that question, whether how we heal people or how we make the protection to ourselves or to our family, because like I feel threat as well. I don't know whether when I gotta wake up and get some kind of lawsuit, or I never feel comfortable to go into some places because maybe my life was in the threat or something like that. I think this kind of feeling is there. The thing is like the situation is different in Thailand right now, a little bit different in Thailand right now, because at least I mean, even those who are preserve the junta government power, the military rule government is preserve their power through elected system for the new government. Of course, they are still exercising a lot of human rights violation continuously by using so many functions in the society, because this kind of human rights violation cannot done only through the junta government without any social mechanism or bureaucratic institutions at all. They need to have cooperation. Even the universities that I work, Mahidol University or Chulalongkorn University, they are hypocrited with this kind of you know, authoritarian environment. So then when we deal with the management of the universities, they exercise almost the same mentality as those who are from you know, because they have to have certain connections, because otherwise they cannot live very well. So then they have to comply or let themselves to comply to certain level of this authority from the military rule government. And then of course, like there are some options for you. First of all, you can choose like what you are choosing like right now, to go against them, to really put the principle like before you, and of course like trying to deal with those principles to at least to stand with that principle. But of course, like there are many other options that maybe you comply with them a little bit and then try to survive in this kind of very critical situation. But that I didn't do by myself, and I don't recommend you to do. The thing is, I can give you some examples. A friend of mine who used to help me teaching undergrad level in Mahidol University before. During the time of this, like, struggling demonstrations, a lot of youth and kids have been arrested, underage kids have been arrested against the junta government, and of course sometimes with the least majesty charge. That is a kind of a very, very idiotic kind of lawsuit anyway. But anyway, a friend of mine that I mentioned about, she was very good in like healing, so sort of healings and the kind of thing, so they form up a group which is still active until now, to have like to help people for the healings, like individuals or groups healing. So then many of our members of the movement have been using their services, in terms of healing. I myself got into the service once, like I was very a kind of pretty much like in stress, and she said, okay, you can listen to this particular music and try to have some tea, like they have special herbs, we use so many means of healing. Okay. And this is a kind of individual and group healing. But as I told you that I also talk about the social healing here. Here, if you take a look, here we heal the past, as a social healing. But this kind of social healing needs to be systematic. It's because it's not the healing that I told you that you can organize a group of people who are capable, to work psychologically, could be psychiatrists, could be like those who work with like, a natural way of healings. And that's one thing. But this is what systematic kind of healing, social healing, and how to recognize the group of people. I tell you, right, there are certain conditions that cause into the protracted pain, and these, to eliminate all these causes is the way that we can heal the people in the society as a social healing mechanism, to make the recognition of the people. But this is going to happen right now because nobody's, but the thing is like you can recognize among you yourself, be a part of the movement, be a part of your friends, trying to support the group. This is also a kind of social healing, being a part of those fighters, being a part of those who have been in front, being a part of their family. This is what we can do right now. Of course, like we hope that we can at certain point would punish them. But the thing is like, how can we punish them right now? I don't think so. But the thing is like before reaching into this punishment or either amnesty, it takes a kind of process that I mentioned about earlier. So then this is how we deal from individual level into like the scope of like the wider scope in the society. Okay. A little bit of one more point is that I would love to share some experience, of this kind of healing, because the thing is like it is very difficult when we fight and we have no power. We have almost no power. We act as if we do have one, but we don't have any power at all. It is exhausting. It is just like walking in, in the very deep mud. So how can we just get out from that point, from time to time? You need to form the collaboration of networks, friends, networks, and try to help each other, try to work together, try to be a part, try to encourage, and of course, like to help in one of those functions. Don't and this kind of thing will help you to get rid of all those very, very difficult situations. And those what I did by myself, because I could not, get until today without any help from friends and those who are really appreciate the value of our fighting. And of course, like those are still friends and colleagues that I still keep on working with, and I really appreciate their help. And this is just only from my firsthand experience, and still right now. And we can play some trick, you know, when I have like a police or secret agents surveillance me, you know, like I was having lunch in the restaurant, and they parked their car somewhere. So, you know, I just walk to their car, just like knock, hey, come join us for lunch, you know, so then otherwise you will get hungry. You know, this kind of thing, you know, just a little thing that I cannot call it fighting back, but just something that annoying them all the times, you know. And this kind of thing might help you to feel like, okay, I could do something. Of like, you know, taking small pictures of things, you know, when they do something, you know, illegal or whatever, we can just do that to really like don't let them feel so comfortable abusing us, you know. We have to fight back, but to fight back fiercely, maybe we cannot win. So we have to find some trick in order to fight back against them. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kajan Ek. It's so good to hear your presentation again. And I'm not going to respond directly to the questions that have been asked, but I just wanting to share, I mean, humbly, I'm not an expert in human rights in conflict situation. I think the experiences that our colleagues in Myanmar, I mean, as professors and teachers are going through, it's very challenging. But I feel like at this moment, when, you know, our countries are in conflict situation at some level, it's an opportunity to also reflect on the kind of biases that perhaps are ingrained in the society. So at the moment, we see ourselves as victims of violence, of human rights violations, but also in the context of Myanmar particularly, I think it's very complex, and there are a lot of discriminations on different at different levels. So while we feel that we are victims now, perhaps it's also important to take this opportunity to reflect and maybe ask the students, the learners, if you have opportunity to teach them, to reflect about the kind of discrimination and biases that may be going on in the society against different group of people. As Ajahn Sivappa said yesterday also, and Dr. Felisa mentioned, that human rights work requires both cognitive, that means use critical thinking and reasonable thinking to understand the situation, as well as emotion. So I think we want to understand why some people engage in certain behaviors, or if we have biases against certain groups of people as well, and how that might come about, and how that, if we recognize that, what can be done to reduce that kind of prejudice or biases that we have against other groups of people as well. And I think this is something could lead to some healing as well. I'm not sure, but just thinking that when you think that there are people suffering on different parts of the society, it's not just the self, it could help to see the bigger pictures, that we may be part of the violence, the biases in some way, or in one way or another. This is something called pedagogy of discomfort. We engage in the discomfort, talking about our own biases, and how we might also change that, and that might lead to looking at possible change for the larger society. So I think that's something I just want to offer my little observation on this part, Kajan. Thank you, Ka.